evening. It's a pleasure to be here this evening with the Rotary community, with the Rotary E-Club. Thanks to Srimatesh, my old friend Shruti Chhatrapati. And they've asked me to talk about the theme of youth and governance. Now, this is a fascinating and very, very broad topic. At one level, if you look at the newspaper headlines, not so much from within India, but from the rest of the world, you see examples of the youth being out there at the forefront of change, of imagining new paradigms of governance. The Arab Spring has been led by numerous youngsters who've gone out there and expressed their opinion, who've used newer technologies to come together and mobilize. So lots of interesting things that are happening, and youth, because in some sense they are at the forefront of technological change, have been able to stay alive to issues and ideals that are around the world and essentially take it forward into action. When I use the word ideals in the context of youth, I use that very, very meaningfully, because youth are essentially idealistic. Youth are young and are full of hope. It's a state of mind which really wishes for the best for everyone. And when youth look around and see corruption, a decline in governance, a lack of political engagement, youth will be disappointed and youth will want to take action. They have the fire, the energy, the drive, the vision, and that's really what makes youth so much more different than anybody else. Long time ago, Winston Churchill made a statement in a different context where he said, if you aren't a communist by the age of 30, you have no heart. If you're still a communist at the age of 40, you have no head. Really, what he's talking about is that youth and youngsters are fired with passion, commitment, empathy, a desire for change. Right? So how do youth engage with governance to bring about this change? Let's think about different ways this can be done. One is by just standing up and expressing their opinions, by discovering their capacity to stand up to the establishment, to stand up to anything that they see as wrong. A couple of examples. Many years ago, we had an organization which had attacked young women in a pub in Bangalore, and this group threatened to come to Bangalore city and attack youth here on Valentine's Day, basically saying that they did not approve of youngsters expressing their affection for one another in any kind of public setting. Well, whatever the issue is, who is someone to tell us what is right and wrong in terms of cultural behavior? Okay? How can we stand for this kind of moral policing? We needed to stand up and protest. And so I basically just sent out the word through media and social media, and we managed to organize about 25 simultaneous protest rallies across Bangalore city. And tons of college students came out. We had protests in IT parks, and that was an example of youth standing up for what they believed was right, sending a message. That was the first of many new engagements. For the longest time, the youth have stayed away from expressing their concerns. They've been complacent, they've been quiet, they've not known that they have the capacity to stand up and express their disgust, their anger, their dissatisfaction. And we triggered that here in Bangalore. And in some ways, in the years that have followed, we have seen youth out on the streets in a variety of protest movements aimed at, the last one that comes to mind is the tragic incident in New Delhi when the young Nirbhaya was gang raped and succumbed. What happened after that? Without even a leader, you saw the youth of Delhi, youth of the country essentially standing up, coming out on the streets and saying enough is enough. We need a safer country, we need respect for women. How did this all emerge? This emerged because youth were fired with passion and with anger, with dissatisfaction, with disgust at the state of affairs. That is the power of youth. That's what it can do. It can very, very quickly. We saw governance change. We saw the Verma committee appointed. We saw very quick assessment of issues, and we saw the laws change. That is an example of the kind of impact youth can have on policy change, on improving governance. We have to continue along these lines. There are many other constructive ways this can be done. Today, the youth are in a very blessed and happy position. If you take a step back and look at the generations of educated Indians that have gone before us, the first generation essentially worked for the government. The next generation had a certain amount of confidence and some level of security, and they worked in the private sector, they turned entrepreneurs. And today, the next generation that's out there is certainly secure, they're certainly confident of their future, and so now they are looking for ways to make an impact on society, to make, make their lives have some fulfilling meaning. Every member of the Rotary is not just there for fellowship, you're also there because Rotary gives you an opportunity to make some constructive difference to society. And in that, there is so much reinforcement, being with fellow youngsters who are also interested in going out and making a change, in making a difference. So today, when you look at the youngsters around me, I find that they are willing to take a year off and work as a legislative assistant to a member of parliament to help improve their performance. You have people taking time off from their careers and joining the Prime Minister's Rural Development Fellowship. In Karnataka, the previous government had something called the Jnana Fellows, where youngsters, took 6 months off or a year off and worked in various government departments. So what is this all about? It's about not treating government as something far away, but as something that you can learn from and you can contribute to. And there are so many constructive ways in which this can be done. And we need to find even more. And that's an example of formally engaging with governance to improve things. There are numerous other informal ways in which you can improve governance. One is to just be alive and alert to developments that are taking place around you. If our citizenry is engaged, if our citizenry is informed, our citizenry will be in a position to stand up and raise a finger and say, what's going on? Why is this being done? Why is this not being done? What can we do to correct things? These are the kinds of questions that are essential in order to keep the checks and balances in our system alive and flourishing. We have institutions that are designed to ensure checks and balances, but those institutions have their own flaws, they have their own pluses and minuses. Today, the media plays a huge role in playing, in trying to check government and business power, excesses, revealing, mistakes and misdeeds. But too often, what you see on the TV is a cacophony. Too often, what you see is more heat than light. And so in these situations, it's important for youth to use social media, to use blogs, to use their own research, to go out there and present a more detailed point of view so that everyone is aware of what's going on. And that awareness brings strength. Checks, misdeeds, and misgovernance. This needs to be taken much further. In various contexts, you have opportunities for youngsters who have time on their hands, who have creativity in their veins, who have passion in every every aspect of what they think and do, to go out and make an impact. Think about it. If a road is being constructed around you, right, a bunch of youngsters can get together and say, well, let us perform a social audit on this particular project, right? Is this being done correctly? Is the contractor adhering to the terms? Otherwise, what typically happens is these activities take place and the road is designed to deteriorate in a year so that one more contract can take place with its attendant kickbacks, right? We need to prevent that. And we can prevent that if we stand up and observe. And we say, look, a bunch of us are here performing our duty as citizens, and we are checking to make sure you are doing what you said you were going to do. In a variety of schemes, especially in rural India, with things like the Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, there is a concept of a social audit that is part of the process to make sure that projects that have been paid for have actually materialized on the ground. The people who have supposed to have been paid are actually alive and present and have done their job, right? And so this is where, in that larger scheme of checks and balances, voluntary engagement in auditing government activities would make a huge difference. Here, we're not talking about partisan activity. We're talking about governance improvement through citizen action. There are numerous other ways. If you essentially, there's this concept that sunlight is the best disinfectant. Providing information makes a huge impact. When you read about the government services, delivery of healthcare, education, etc., we hear stories about lack of attendance. We hear stories about doctors who are not doing their job, who are horrible in their government service, but are spectacular in their private practices in the evening, right? Then, who suffers? It is the poor, the person who cannot afford private healthcare, who suffers, who gets bad treatment. These sorts of instances must be documented, must be witnessed and recorded and reported. And that is again where a bunch of youngsters could make a huge difference. If various communities have a sense that there are youngsters watching who are observing whether people who are being paid to do something are actually doing what they're supposed to do, you're going to change the way services are delivered, and you're going to make an impact on the poorest of the poor. All this requires collective action. All this requires people standing up and being bold enough to say, we're not just going to do some gala event, we're going to take on the challenging, courageous task of coming together to audit, to examine whether some governmental service is being delivered the way it should be. That's not going to be easy. It need not be confrontational. You can go and speak to various political players, to the police ahead of time and say, this is what we're going to do, and we're not going to do anything confrontational. We are there as observers, right? So these are, you'll figure this out very soon if you take that first step. There are other things that I think you can do to improve governance. Today, we all lament the state of affairs in the political world. We are wondering what happened to the glorious stories of the freedom movement and their leaders that we heard about, who gave us the modern democracy that we're so happy to be in. What has happened to the quality of leadership? Why are we finding all kinds of elements who are succeeding while good people are not? Well, one of the key factors is because the good people are being driven out of the system, essentially because most youngsters are taking a step back. They're not engaged in bringing about positive change. And so that is something we must put aside. We must change this. And we have to overcome a certain amount of cynicism that has developed amongst us. The cynicism is, my vote doesn't count, they're all corrupt anyway, they're all scoundrels. No, they're not. There are lots of good people in the system, lots of people who want youngsters with passion and fire and idealism to contribute their time and energy to come together with other resources to help make a difference, to stand up for what is right, to oppose what is wrong. And for that kind of political mobilization, we need youngsters to participate. During the last Karnataka Assembly election, I organized something called a political action internship. I was going to be campaigning anyway, and so I said, why should I do this alone? Let me use this opportunity to create a platform for a large number of youngsters to come together and engage in the political process. For most of us, not for me, but for most of us, the political world is some black box, some distant, world we're inhabited by strange people. We have no connection. We've got to change that. It is our democracy, and it is our duty to make that democracy come alive in the best manner possible. For that, we have to ensure that we also participate, that we participate voluntarily, and we open our minds to the wonderful people who are there in the system, who are trying valiantly to bring about positive change. We are trying, we work with communication. who work with, it's not a one-way thing. It's not also a one-way thing of pointing fingers at the political class. It's basically, essentially, the other day I had a friend who wanted some help from an MLA, and I arranged that meeting to go and resolve some local developmental problem with drains. And he sent me a message saying, it's a mela out here at that MLA's home office. Now, of course it's a mela, because it's only the educated youngsters who stay away. The poor, the people who really need help and intervention are out there asking the elected representative, for positive change. But every elected representative, every candidate needs input on what are the problems. They need teams to help them look for solutions. And across the board, if we have a public government, public youth partnership, there is no end to what we can achieve. And here, I must tell you that in every domain, there is a possibility of doing amazing stuff. If you don't want to do stuff that engages the political world, if you want to work just in anonymity, but you want to fix problems, again, there are ways of demonstrating what a good job you can do. In Bangalore, there is an anonymous group called the Ugly Indian, and they are out there, essentially checking on problems that we see and ignore. The garbage that's piled up on the street, the wall that has been turned into a place for committing nuisance, as they say, right? And essentially, what they've done is a bunch of them get together and say, okay, we're going to fix this spot. Spot fixing, not in the cricket sense, but in a practical sense, right? And so they go out there and bring about, change, and then put in some interventions that make what was a dirty, sore spot into possibly even a green garden. And they don't want any credit, but they leave their impression behind. That's another example of helping government do its job, helping people realize that they should not, ignore problems, but they have the power and the capacity to go out there and solve them. So essentially, we have this situation where there are so many different ways in which youth can go out there and engage. What I would really urge the youngsters to do is to experiment, to think about reaching out to various kinds of organizations, to various kinds of governmental players, officials, or others, and to think about how transformative change can happen. Many times I keep thinking about what technology can do. Here we have, when we think of youth, we think of what we call digital natives, people who are born with the capacity, who have grown up in an era where technology is so easy to use, right? Then think about how you can harness the technology for improving governance, right? When we stand, there's these simple things. When you're waiting for the red light to change in traffic, that simple clock which tells you at the traffic signal how many more seconds to wait calms you down, prevents you from honking, and certainly, allays your concern about whether that light's going to change in a hurry or not, right? You can, a simple technological fix. Think about the numerous other technological fixes that youngsters can come up with. Imagine working with the bus transport system to install a GPS-based alert at every bus stop, so that in how many more minutes which bus is coming and where, and which bus is coming and where it's going to go and what time, etc. Think about the things we can do with this marvelous technology called the mobile telephone, with its camera, with its email, with its multiple functionalities, right? Essentially, if you see a problem, you should be in a position to take a picture of that problem and email it immediately into the electricity company, the road company, the traffic police, whoever, right? And you can get them, you can work with these departments to create some kind of a problem redressal portal, right? Where as soon as the problem is logged, then it's visibly available to everybody to see which official it's been assigned to and what action is going to be taken and when, right? And this is something that could become an open governance mechanism. These are all things that won't work unless enough people participate. But obviously youngsters are participating. When you're in the commute and listening to the radio, someone's calling and saying, look, there's a traffic jam here, avoid it, right? It's the same kind of spirit, a spirit of public engagement, of contributing to improving the lives of ourselves and everyone around us. That's the kind of spirit we need youngsters to imbibe and to share with everyone else. That's the spirit that, along with technological progress, with creative engagements with governance in multiple ways, we can really make an extraordinary difference. For too long, our youngsters, all of us, have stayed back. We've basically said, governance is for somebody else. Our job is to enjoy life and make money. Well, that's not the case. As we make money, as we enjoy life, as our country's economy, picks up and moves and restores India to its rightful historic place as one of the leading economies of the world, there are people who are falling behind. And it is imperative for idealistic youth to also look over their shoulders and see who's behind, who's fallen, and what we can do about it. Because it is not our job to shut the railway compartment and move on. It is also our job to reach out and bring people in who have not boarded the train to progress. There are numerous non-governmental organizations that are making a huge difference. I didn't really talk about that, but that is again another sphere that I see lots of youngsters making a difference in. But that's easy. It's easier than engaging with government. It's easier than addressing the political pushes and pulls, confronting crooked contractors, things like that. So it's something that comes more naturally. But it's going to take courage, it's going to take drive, it's going to take vision, it's going to take discipline, it's going to take a lot of energy and commitment. But if our youth have all these things, I know they have that in bucket loads. They're full of passion and fire and commitment and ideals and vision for a better India. Before you know it, you and I and all of us working together will have transformed governance for the better. Let's go out there and make it happen. As you go out there and make a difference, I'd like to learn about what you've done. I'd like to work with you as we go out there and together make a difference. So I'd urge you to stay in touch with me too. My Facebook page is facebook.com/Prof RajeevGowda, capital P ROF, capital RAJEEV, capital GOWDA. And my email ID is RajeevGowda@gmail.com, RAJEEVGOWDA@gmail.com.